This year, Governor Dugard signed into law HB 1133, which created a year-round legislative planning committee, which effectively makes it a super committee, as it is comprised of the leadership from both parties in both houses and does not conform to the state constitution. Constitution's limitations on 2-year terms of office, term limits, or to limits governing the days the legislators may remain in session. With so many exceptions to the state constitution, do you find this law to be unconstitutional? Why or why not? And if elected, would you work to support public efforts to repeal this law?
You got
it.
1133 was sponsored by House and Senate leadership. I voted against it. It does establish a planning committee. Most of the members, there is one mandated by, I'll try to be brief, Speaker of the House, Pro Tem of the Senate. One is mandated to be a member of the Appropriations Committee, and I think there's 7 members at large to be put on by the Executive Board, the Chairman of the Executive Board on it, as I recall it. There's more in there than I read in the bill. There's nothing in there about days of session or term limits or anything like that. What it does, it's supposed to be a long-range planning committee because, as it is every year, there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions when you come to November and December and then into January, where there hasn't been a plan. They haven't been communicating to the executive branch. I didn't like it because I think that's what the executive board's job is. I think it puts too many people looking at it, having eyes on things, because the executive committee, the executive board, takes care of the month-to-month, day-to-day operation for the legislature. I think the planning, I voted against it. I think the planning committee was an overstep, but it is the law, it's signed into law. We're going through the process of making those appointments. We'll make those appointments in June, so they're in place July 1st. It's the law. We're going to see if it works or not.
I'm on the House side where I believe this originated. The leader West brought this forward as a planning bill, or excuse me, not a planning bill, but as a mechanism whereby the legislative branch can plan. Right now, the legislative branch goes up here for 40 days, goes back home. There's no planning mechanism. There's nothing going into the future. I voted in favor of this bill. I'm in favor of this bill. Not this particular bill, but the concept of planning, I think, is very, very valid. I don't know of any business that doesn't plan for the future. The legislative branch does not. We go for 30 days, 40 days, we work on about 1,000 bills and go home. Where there's no leadership, or not leadership. The executive branch has all the leadership of the planning, and they don't dictate, but they present their plan to the legislative branch, and we react to it. I think it's important that we do some planning. And what's been read into this, what I heard about this today, I don't read that into this at all. The intent was that these people will be appointed by the E-Board, and if they are not elected, they can serve out that term, and then they would be, the new crop would then would be appointed. That's what I understood about the bill.
The Constitution guarantees you a right to initiative, a referendum, and I believe in that. I also believe that you have a right to submit any legislation you want through legislator. They say that making laws is like, making sausage or something. Well, that's probably true. It's kind of an ugly process. But the end result is good. And so I'm not restricting what we do now. I think it works. Sure, it's hard, it's labor intensive when they get there, but the system works. Planning is definitely necessary. As in any business, it is a business, even though you're talking about part-time workers. Thank you.
I didn't look at this casually myself. I think it has some implications that I don't particularly like. I think you're here tonight because you want to hear who's going to represent you from this county. If I'm elected, I would hate to think that you could contact somebody else to find out what bills ought to be introduced next year, or in other words, take it away from me. I would be your elected representative. I'm assuming I would get elected. The way I see this bill, the way I've been introduced to it, they can find out anybody to review these bills before they're even allowed to go out of committee or whatever. I just don't think that's right. And it appears to me that it's almost like a system of czars that we have at the national level. It really reminds me of that. I don't like it. I don't like the sound of it. So anyway, thank you.
You don't need a planning committee to do planning. You know, I was part of Republican leadership in the House for 2 years as a majority whip, and we did lots of planning. We had retreats. We had House legislative retreats where we talked about legislative priorities and agendas. You don't need any of this mandate. You don't need people that are appointed by the E-board just to come up with some kind of an overall plan. That's what the House Republican Caucus and the Senate Republican Caucus and the Democrats is they elect leadership, and it's leadership's responsibility to work with the governor or work against the governor, depending on your point of view, and try and promote a particular agenda. And you don't need a committee to do that. What I don't like see happening in the legislature in recent years, and I think some of it's as a result of term limits, because we run people into leadership too quickly, I think, for what we used to do. But there's been some efforts to interfere with that legislator's confidential relationship with the Legislative Research Council, and to be able to go in and to be able to put together with their constituents a piece of legislation and have a confidential relationship with that person in LRC, be able to put whatever their piece of legislation is, put it out there, throw it in the hopper, send it to committee, let it have a committee hearing, and be voted up or down. That's wrong.